And I do love the theme of this sermon series that you've been in this month, Rise and Shine, which has, as you know, highlighted some of the great texts of the prophet Isaiah and allowed the prophet's words to challenge you and shape you anew during this first month of this new year. And today we find our way to Isaiah in a different way than you have, I think, the last 3 Sundays, but through the Gospel of Luke, in a very famous passage that Regina just read for us, marking the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. And as you heard, it's in this passage where Jesus essentially announces what I will call his mission statement, as Jesus quotes the prophet Isaiah. And so, yes, I said mission statement. Did you realize that Jesus had a mission statement? He did. It's not just a newfangled thing these days to have a mission statement. We hear a lot about those mission statements. Many organizations have one. We certainly do at the Methodist Home in response to Christ and the church. We aim to restore childhood, strengthen families, and cultivate a people-building organization. I suspect Pittman Park has a mission statement, or perhaps you have just claimed the wonderful mission statement of the United Methodist Church, which is to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Why, do you know? For the transformation of the world. I love that mission statement. To make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. But of course, it's not just churches and ministries who have mission statements. You can see them hanging in businesses, in hospitals, even in retail stores. I've seen them. Now, one very sarcastic mission statement hater took it upon himself to write some humorous mission statements to poke some fun at the business world's new obsession with mission statements. So here's a quick sampling of those that he wrote. Our mission, he says, is to be paid on time or sooner if possible. Our mission is to accelerate customers buying all the stuff we sell. And then finally, our mission is to improve the lives of people by pushing products they don't need or that don't work. Some of you may relate to that very personally. I don't know what you think about mission statements, but I do think it's fair to say that Jesus had one. And it wasn't just words on a plaque on a wall. And it certainly was not self-interested. It was anything but that. It was inscribed in the sacred Hebrew scriptures that Jesus had learned as a child and that had shaped his life. And he knew when he read it that day in Nazareth at his hometown synagogue that he was, in fact, speaking about himself. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Powerful words straight from the prophet Isaiah. Now remember, as Jonathan and Stephanie have reminded you over the past 3 weeks, Isaiah was speaking words of hope to a people in exile, or just coming home from exile, people who had lost home and identity, who wondered if God had abandoned them and couldn't imagine what kind of future could ever be possible for them again. Isaiah was relaying a promise of God, giving them a vision of what was yet to come, good news for the poor, freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, and freedom for the oppressed. And the one who would bring all of this to bear, an unnamed servant Messiah, according to Isaiah. Centuries before, that was the promise. But then fast forward centuries later, Jesus has come on the scene. We know the background. Born in Bethlehem, recognized by Simeon and Anna, found teaching the teachers in the temple at age 12, baptized in the River Jordan, tempted in the wilderness. And by the way, that temptation in the wilderness is what precedes the story that Regina read for us today. Jesus had just come out of that wilderness temptation experience. And when he returns to Galilee, he teaches in the synagogues around Galilee, and news about him begins to spread even before he reaches his hometown of Nazareth. As Luke tells us, he goes to the synagogue as was his custom. He did that regularly. And that day he was surrounded by people who had watched him grow up. You know, Mary and Joe's boy, now turned preacher. And like he had probably done many times before in that very synagogue, Jesus stood up to read the scriptures. That's what the men in the synagogue did. They took turns reading the scriptures and then commenting on them. They didn't have priests. They were lay-led, so to speak. So not because Jesus was necessarily anybody special at that point, but perhaps because that's just what the men in the synagogue did that particular day. The job fell to him. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to Jesus, and he began to read. Not just ancient words that they had all heard many times. No, on this day, Jesus began to read about himself. He was confirming, I am that servant Messiah, and this is what I came to do. Proclaim good news to the poor, freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then as the text tells us, he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. And as Luke tells us, the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on Jesus, fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Now notice that the first word Jesus spoke, apart from the reading of Isaiah, apart from the reading of the scripture, the first word that he spoke is, did you catch it? Today. Today, this sacred prophecy has been fulfilled in your hearing. Today, this is not just a reminder of an ancient promise from the past, nor is it simply a prediction of what will happen in the future. No, this is about today. This is about how the good news of the Messiah's presence in the world puts evil and darkness and injustice on alert. They do not and will not have the last word, because a new kingdom is coming and indeed is now breaking in, and that new kingdom brings with it the seeds of liberation. Good news for the poor, release for the captives, recovering of sight for the blind, and freedom for those who are oppressed. Indeed, things that have been wrong will be made right. Starting when? That's right, today. Wow. Now, the rest of the story that we did not read today is fascinating. I commend it to you, but not right now. Later this afternoon, perhaps read their response to Jesus in his hometown synagogue. But today we're focusing on the scripture from Isaiah the prophet, what Jesus read. And it's fair to ask, who are the poor? Who are the captive, the blind, and the oppressed? Now, plenty of folks in Jesus' day would have fit that bill, including, I might say, those who didn't even think they were poor, captive, blind, or oppressed. But then, like now, there are certainly obvious answers to that, and we could name countless examples of the literally poor, captive, blind, and oppressed in Jesus' world and in our world today. People whom Jesus loves and whom he came to rescue and heal and set free. And we would be the blind ones if we didn't also see ourselves in those descriptions. But that's a whole different sermon, so I'm not going to go there today. I want to stretch your thinking a little bit this morning and tell you that in my role at the Methodist Home, and by the way, I'm the Vice President of Church Relations, and I'm also a chaplain for 2 of our 5 campuses. So in my role at the Methodist Home, I see examples every single day in living color of poor, captive, blind, and oppressed. And I'm eager every day to share with them that with the coming of Messiah, there is indeed good news. You may or may not know how many foster kids we have in the state of Georgia right now. I would ask you to guess, but I'll just tell you. We currently have over 11,000 foster children in the state of Georgia. Children who, for one reason or another, are not able to live with their families because of some form of abuse or neglect. And we take care of just some of those children at the Methodist Home for Children and Youth. We have 5 campuses across South Georgia. Of course, our mother campus is in Macon. Our original campus, as I've already said, dating back to 1872. Our kids come to us traumatized and wounded, and that trauma literally changes the way that their brains work. As I said, we can talk poor, captive, blind, and oppressed in literal terms, which is totally valid because Jesus came for those folks. Our kids at the Methodist Home, though, so often fit those categories in ways that are less literal, but no less real. Poor in their sense of self-worth, captive to the trauma of their past, blind to the possibilities for hope, and oppressed by the weight of what has happened to them. I suspect many of us are familiar with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, primarily when it comes to veterans of war. That's the context in which we think about PTSD most often. But I see children every day who suffer similar effects, who've never seen combat or traditional combat in a war zone, but whose brains and psyches have been changed in very similar ways. You see, trauma, especially chronic trauma, doesn't just affect us emotionally. Trauma actually changes the way our brains function. And high doses of adversity and trauma affect brain development and the functioning of the whole body. And one of the things it affects is the way we see the future. Many of our kids feel pretty hopeless about the future. Instead of naturally thinking, as perhaps most of us do, that we can make choices which can affect our lives, our futures in good ways, they often think things like this: I can't control it, so what's the point? It's hopeless. I am worthless, which brings so much shame to them. And sometimes I hate me, and I hate you, and I hate everybody, and I sure don't trust anybody. That is very often the way that our kids think, even if they're not fully conscious of it. The day after I started at our Columbus campus, and by the way, that campus is called the Carpenter's Way Ranch, and yes, it refers to Jesus. The day after I started at Carpenter's Way, almost 3 years ago, we received a new resident whom I'll call Daniel. And I was talking with Daniel one day about his future, telling him all the things that the Methodist Home could help him do. And remember, it was my first week. I was so eager. I had been sort of a volunteer pastor with the Methodist Home in Columbus for many years, very supportive of the Methodist Home. But I was on staff, and so I was new at this particular role. And Daniel listened to me very respectfully, and he finally responded. He said, Miss Lynn, I am 16 years old, and I shouldn't even be here. And he didn't mean here at the Methodist Home. He meant here on the planet. He said, every male in my family who is over the age of 16 is either dead or in prison. What future are you talking about? My heart just wanted to skip a beat. That was a good lesson for me. Friends, I want Daniel to hear the words of Isaiah announcing the hope that the Messiah ushers in. Even in the midst of this exile, you, Israel, you, Daniel, have a future. Isaiah 61:4, they, through God's Spirit, shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall raise up the former devastations. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations, the prophet's words. Yes, there has been devastation, often generations of devastation. Yes, there are ruined cities, even ruined lives. But the message of Isaiah is the message of Jesus, is the message that we still have to share today. There is good news. Hope has come. The restorer has arrived. And because of that, precious Daniel, you have a future with hope. That is the message we get to share in countless ways, big and small, with the children and youth that we are privileged to serve. Now, why do we do that? Because remember, they are the ones that Jesus came for. So often, poor in their sense of self-worth, captive to the trauma of their past, blind to the possibilities for hope, and oppressed by the weight of what has happened to them in their past. I've been working on a video collage of interviews with some of our kids, and recently one of our youngest kids, and let me say this, on our 4 satellite campuses, not Macon, but the other 4, we serve teenagers. We don't serve the younger children, so 12 to 18, 19 years old. And so on our campus, we have teenage boys every satellite campus has only boys or only girls, and we have boys at my home campus in Columbus. So this young man, 13 years old, one of our youngest kids, he was in my office just sort of hanging out with me for a little while, and I'll call him Carter. And I said, Carter, I'm working on a project to interview some of you guys who are residents here at Carpenter's Way. And I said, would you be willing to be interviewed for this project that I'm working on? And he said, maybe. He said, what would I have to say? And I said, well, maybe you could just do like a fill in the blank. If I give you the first part of the sentence, you could fill it in. And I said, let's practice right now. And I said, let's just try this one. Carpenter's Way has helped me, and you fill in that blank if you feel like you have an answer to that. And Carter paused, and he looked up, and I thought he would be really silly or playful or funny because he's often that way. And he looked up for a moment, and then I heard him say, feel alive. And I was stunned. Carpenter's Way has helped me feel alive. That's what he said. I said, Carter, tell me what you mean by that. And he said, well, before I came here, I was very dark. I didn't talk to people. I was very quiet. I didn't care about nothing, he said. These are his words, 13 years old. I felt closed-hearted. I was very closed to myself, and I wouldn't really talk to anyone. I didn't want to let anybody in. But being here has helped me be more open-hearted and less strict on myself. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, less hard on myself. He said, I was with my dad moving everywhere. We moved everywhere, Miss Lynn. He said, but I like being here because this place feels safe. Carter, age 13. Now, I don't know about you, but I hear in Carter's words echoes of release for prisoners, freedom for the oppressed. And in a very real sense, friends, we at the Methodist Home, and indeed all of us, are called to take up the mission of Jesus, to join him in that mission and to live it out by God's grace with the kids and families that we serve. A couple of years ago, I was on our Americas campus. I served them as chaplain as well, and we have girls at our Americas campus. And I knew that we had received a new resident. I'm generally there on Wednesdays, so she had come in a few days before I arrived on that Wednesday. I also knew that she had been a resident of our Valdosta campus for about a year before coming to our Americas campus. And so she knew about the Methodist Home already. So I walked in the cottage that afternoon, and JJ, I'll call her JJ, not her real name, but JJ was watching TV, or actually she was playing a video game, and she politely stopped her video game to chat with me, which I appreciated. And she immediately put me on alert, and she said, she was very polite, but she said, Miss Lynn, don't ask me to tell you my story. And I said, I won't ask you to tell you your story. Because you see, telling their story is painful often, and they don't like to tell their story so often. So I said, I'm not going to ask you that, JJ. I said, but could you tell me, since you've lived at the Methodist Home for already about a year now, I said, could you tell me something good about the Methodist Home? And that girl began to talk and talk and talk. And I said, I stopped her literally after about 10 minutes. And I said, JJ, I said, my job at the Methodist Home, besides being your chaplain, is to tell people the story of the Methodist Home and to speak and preach on behalf of the Methodist Home and to let people know what God is doing through the Methodist Home. And I said, I wish I had had all that on tape. And she said, well, I'll tell you again. So she did. And with her permission, I recorded it on my phone and I transcribed it later. So I want to tell you just some of JJ's story in her own words. Remember, my question was, what is something good about the Methodist Home? And her first sentence caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting it. She said, everything is good about the Methodist Home. She said, without the Methodist Home, I would still be living on the streets, surviving for food, stealing stuff out of stores just to eat at night to feed my younger brother and sister. She said, I was taking care of all my own things, and it was a struggle. Here they take care of us, they clothe us, they feed us, and they're very much just like a parent that some kids wish they could have. These staff here, they're trying to help you, not harm you. They're here for you to help you let your guard down and show you the love and compassion your parents couldn't show you. They're all united as one to help us. She said, even though I messed up some of my chances, and pause here, she had been on our Valdosta campus, then she had gone to a traditional foster family, and that didn't work well for her. So the Methodist Home said, come on back. And we received her back on our Valdosta campus. So this is what she's talking about. Even though I messed up some of my chances, they still gave me a second chance to come back to the home. I learned a lot of things from the Methodist Home. I learned about taking care of myself. I learned about hygiene and being a proper girl. This next sentence makes me really sad. She said, I learned that wearing skinny jeans and a crop top doesn't make me cute. Now, I celebrate that she learned that, but that just reminds me of what our girls in particular struggle with so much. I learned that wearing skinny jeans and a crop top doesn't make me cute. I learned that me personally, my own self, my own personality, that's what makes me pretty. She said, without the Methodist Home, I wouldn't have anything great in my life. I wouldn't have clothes. I wouldn't have shoes. Think about that. That's what she calls great. I wouldn't have clothes. I wouldn't have shoes. I would still be living on the streets. I would still just be messed up, she says, causing problems. But I'm changing my life. I'm doing ILP, which stands for Independent Living Program. It's a program of the state that we participate in. She said, I've made up my own choice to go to college and be a travel nurse. I'm trying to finish school. At first, I didn't want to go to college. I thought, I'm not for that school stuff. I thought, I'm going to stay with my street stuff, but not anymore. I know that college is what I need, and this is where I belong. JJ, age 16. Do you hear it? Do you hear it? I think it sounds a lot like good news for the poor, release for the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, freedom for the oppressed. And not only do I hear it, but I get to see it. In fact, I have a front row seat. And because of partners like you, Pittman Park United Methodist Church, because of partners like you, I get to be the messenger of that good news day in and day out. Now, I've heard Jonathan and Stephanie challenge you. I've listened to all those sermons this month, and I've heard them challenge you over these last few weeks. Rise, shine, people of Pittman Park United Methodist Church. And from the stories I've heard, boy, have you been shining lately. Thank you. You have been shining. You know that there are so many ways you can rise and shine right here in your own community and far beyond. And I just want to remind you today that when you participate in the work of the Methodist Home, you are participating in that very work that Jesus the Messiah came to inaugurate. John's Gospel, chapter 14, Jesus says this, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. Friends, that's Jesus' invitation to us, loud and clear. I hear it. If you are my disciples, if you believe in me, then join me in this life-transforming, kingdom-coming, heart-mending, world-changing mission. Join me. Rise and shine, people of God at Pittman Park, and may the light of Christ continue to shine through you.